TNKR Media.
Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business, presented by FL Montreal. My name is Dan Delmar, along with FL's Mike Newton. Hey, Mike.
Hey, Dan. How are you?
Excellent. How are you?
Very good, thank you.
Today on the program, we do see the end of the year coming, so we will talk about end-of-year tax planning with Ernie Furt. That is later in the show. But our profile of today is someone who is an artist. He started out as a hairstylist, traveling all around the world with really high-profile clients, left that and became a furniture designer. Daniel Perez of Perez Furniture will join us on the program in a few minutes. So that is on the way. And first, let's talk about some news and notes, Mike. And I think these issues we've talked about for a few weeks in terms of how to best lead a team, especially in crisis. And we talked about leadership styles. You know, you have to have a little bit of arrogance, even a little bit of narcissism. But once you start going down that arrogance route, you kind of disconnect from your team a little bit. And let's talk about a few stories that have dealt with this lately, because arrogance and narcissism in a crisis doesn't really work very well with your employees. This from Fast Company: arrogant leaders continue to rise. Here's how to deal with one. How do you deal with one?
Look, there's, some people try and take them head on, and that will end up creating some kind of conflict. I think it also depends on ultimately where your position lies and what position of influence you have within the organization. I mean, if you're subservient to a narcissistic leader or an arrogant leader, I think the initial change is not about really should be about avoiding challenging their egos and finding a different way to approach it, focusing on how you can help them, right? If being an arrogant and narcissistic individual is about them, so you turn it back and use it on them. How do I help them? How do I feed their ego? How do I continue to end up in a position of trust and in faith? Try and avoid being fooled by them. A lot of times, the narcissistic individuals are very charismatic. They're very eloquent. And they've gotten to a place, the old expression, fake it till you make it. Well, some of them never really made it, and they continue to fake it all the way through. You can also be a source of constructive feedback for an individual. So ultimately, at the end of the day, if your boss is playing in that role. So again, the goal of there's two aspects here. One is, if you can't tolerate them, then you know what, maybe go work for somebody else. But if you can tolerate them and you like what you're doing, then, find a way to feed into what makes them successful, which will then make you successful.
If you're at the head of a business and you're certainly acting sometimes as a mascot for that business, you will get accused of being arrogant. And I've taken that to heart as well. I like to, one colleague once warned me, don't make this business the Dan Delmar show. And I thought that was good advice, because every business has to sort of be a stronger organization outside of the personality that founded it.
Most definitely. And no organization, from certainly on a large scale, should be bigger than one individual ultimately. But there's parts of this, and, I can always remember my father telling me that everybody needs a little bit of larceny in their soul if they're going to succeed at running a business or leading. And, I think the same applies to narcissism. And, there has been so much written on how, business leaders, but particularly business leaders, are, sociopaths and lacking in the sense of empathy and understanding of the people around them. So, I find it interesting because there is a lot of confusion, about personality traits. And ultimately, at the end of the day, to me, you've really got three types. You've got that narcissist, which has a strong sense of entitlement and need for attention and admiration. It's all about me. It's all about feeding my ego. It's all about me making me look good. It's all about everything we do is about me. You've got that Machiavellian style, which is sly, deceptive, distrusting, manipulative. They're characterized by being cynical and misanthropic beliefs, callousness, just not really those people you really like to work for. And then I guess, you can call them the psychopaths or the sociopaths at the end of the day, which are unlikely to consider the needs and wishes of basically anybody around them. And they're not so good with moral boundaries at the end of the day. So you got to find a way to identify, because if you are dealing with somebody in that environment, there is a safe zone. right? Everybody that's going to lead needs a little bit of those things in order to stand up there, in order to lead, in order to have the confidence that you do to run an organization. Where do you draw that line between, okay, this has been good, this is part of what you are, and oh no, I think this person's gone too far.
This piece from Stanford I thought was interesting, how narcissistic leaders destroy from within. And it seems like the big way to distinguish, at least from what I'm interpreting here, is that you have an arrogant, personality-driven business. That's okay. Once that arrogance and that narcissism starts to hurt the business, once you start to look out for you ahead of the business, that might be one sign.
Yeah, I think that, the key of leading, and you're always, look, so long as you continue to lead, you're always going to come across at some point as being, self-serving and narcissistic. I mean, ultimately, if an organization does well and you're a good leader, then you benefit from it. So, I can't say that there's no, this is not a philanthropic environment. So yes, you are going to benefit as a leader when the organization does well. I think you've got to draw that line when every decision that they make or the process is about making their life better. It's about doing better for them. It's about lacking empathy. They're losing constraints on ethical standards. And what'll happen is, as they continue to rise up the corporate ladder, they will, being elected and appointed often validates this sense of entitlement, this sense of I'm better than everybody else. And in many cases, they go too far in the sense that they've lost this touch on reality. And, I've said for years that, when I make a decision, I'm going to make a decision in the best interest of the organization. If it happens to benefit me in the same time, there's nothing wrong with that. But if I make a decision based on it benefiting me that has an effect on the overall organization, now I'm treading in that fine line of narcissism.
So what if you get into a conflict with one? I mean, you pretty much have to just go straight to HR. If it gets too complicated.
Well, again, it depends on the axe that you want to grind and how much influence that leader does have. I mean, if you're talking about the owner of a business, going to HR is really not going to solve your problem, likely. If it happens to be an immediate supervisor, as a manager, as you continue to work your way up, there are a couple of ways around it. I mean, first of all, you have to identify who that individual above you is. So it happens to be the son or daughter of the owner. I'm going to say take a very different approach than you would if it's a random third party. The other thing to look at is that respect level that individual has within the organization. And, if you may actually win by handling the situation well, it may define how you have this leadership skill within you to address a problem. Head on sometimes is a good option if you can create a little bit of self-awareness. But a lot of times the narcissistic personality lacks self-awareness. And, it's always my favorite whenever we do emotional intelligence and empathy and those trainings within the office. And I invite everybody, inevitably those that need it the most always say they don't need it. There's a little bit of an irony in that discussion.
Yeah, and let's just double down and say, Mike, if you're the leader of a business and facing all the pressures that business leaders face these days, and you've never been to therapy to just explore the possibility that maybe there's something you're not handling perfectly, just give it a shot, and your organization will be better for it.
100%. I think, we owe it to ourselves. We owe it to our team. I've for years have done a lot of reading on leadership styles, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I send a lot of articles around internally within the office to partners and managers. And, part of it is to teach them. And part of it is for me to have to read through for my own self-awareness to make sure that I'm not treading over the line in some of these areas. And, so it serves two purposes, but I think all of us that lead have to constantly be keeping ourselves in check, especially in an environment coming out of COVID where, we may have been put to the test more, or we may be drained. Stress and pressure has a big effect on the way people handle their emotional intelligence. And I'm seeing an awful lot. I was hoping summer vacation was going to solve a lot of it. Yeah, unfortunately, it hasn't. There's still an awful lot of people out there who are just not seeing their own behavior and how it affects the other people in the room.
And we're going to jump right into our profile. A very, very interesting story. His name is Daniel Perez. He's the president and founder of Perez Furniture. He's going to tell us about his move from hairdresser to the stars in Hollywood to high-end designer furniture. Danielle, welcome to today's Entrepreneur.
Hello.
So very first easy question, what is Perez Furniture?
So Perez Furniture is a manufacturing facility that started off with the idea of wholesaling affordable furniture, but the old ghost inside of me who loved design actually would not fit well into the whole wholesaling affordable furniture scheme of things. So I pushed a little further into the design and wanting to innovate furniture to bring it to a more comfortable seating and design looks. So that's pretty well it.
I got to ask you, and I'm sure you've been asked this question many times, hairdressing to the stars, designer furniture. I've made a lot of connections between people moving on from one business to the other. I'm having a hard time making this connection. Why? What was if I go back to Simon Sinek's, historic book of Start With Why. Why did you do this? And what is the ultimate purpose? What drove you?
So it's probably a series of many things that happened at one moment in my life. I think that I did pretty well in my hairdressing career, and the better your career goes, the more dependent people become on their vanity. And I think that over a period of time, the whole vanity issue and owning that became a little heavy to hold. I also was a studio hairdresser, which meant that I was traveling around the world on a regular time and living in airports mostly. And I think that was getting a little heavy as well. I just needed to be able to put my feet back on the ground and actually have one place to work out of. And then I'm an extremely passionate person. I was fortunate enough to actually have worked with some of the best people in the fields that I worked in. And basically, my guru at the time was Bruno Desange, who had brought me to Paris. And on a trip to London, on a Fashion Aids fashion show that we were working on, we had a long break, and I got to live his passion through getting into the cabbies and going to visit furniture stores. And passion is a very contagious element, and living that passion through him actually ignited mine. I think when I got back to Canada, I basically wanted to dwell a little bit into the field. So it started off as a hobby, and it is what it is now. Really, maybe luck, maybe a lot of study, a lot of hard work, but mostly passion.
Passion to me is the number one characteristic of any successful entrepreneur. So I totally agree, and I totally see where you can jump from one sense of inspiration to another just based on a passion for something. So you sit down and design. I mean, anybody goes to your website, you have some phenomenally designed furniture, and what inspires a design? What styles, the fabric, the whole exercise. I mean, I challenge everybody to go to the website, because I got to say I was dumbfounded by some of the different things. And what inspires that? How do you get that drive to design something?
I guess that's a good question. I often ask myself the same question: why did I do what I do? I think my background having been fashion, I got to see beautiful fabrics. I got to see beautiful shapes. I got to work with some extremely passionate individuals who put together more than just fashion, but they put together composition. So I guess when I see a car and I see a sofa and I see a lampshade, I see a face. I see scale. I'm a lover of scale. And I think that some scales hurt, some scales invade, and some scales just slip right into your life without any abrasion. So I guess that somehow in me, my love for scale propulses me to do certain things in a certain way that would be different maybe than somebody else. We have some amazing gurus in the world who do some incredible work. So it's very easy to fuel the passion if you do the study.
Danielle, tell me about the mind of a designer. I work with a lot of them, and they can apply their skills in a lot of different areas, whether it's, in a cosmetic way or whether it's building something. What do you look for when you're trying to create a new thing? How does that process work?
So we're often influenced by the times. So if we use the times of COVID, right now. I think that you'll notice that a lot of the designers are making furniture which is warmer, a little pudgier, a little bit more comfortable looking, a little bit more country. Um, and I think that stems from the need of more warmth. Whereas in times when everything is a-okay socially and economically, the furniture will have a tendency to look a little bit more cold, more graphic. So today, the décoiffé of furniture has made its way back into our world because I think that it is a social need. So I think that from that point on, when I'm designing, I guess I'm inhabited by the need to actually do something that looks comfortable.
So I see you as an artist, first and foremost. And how do you meld artistry and functionality? I mean, it's a very difficult thing to do. I'm not sure a lot of artists have been successful necessarily at melding it with functionality. Yours seems to have pretty solid functionality to it. How do you put those two together?
So I think as a designer, which I don't know if I am a designer or not because I'm not educated in the design world. I'm just passionate about beautiful things. I think you go ahead and you dive into the whole design process and you make beautiful things. And at one point you wake up and you realize beautiful is definitely not enough. And basically you start looking at the functionality. You start understanding. Uh, Furniture that's going to hurt people's backs, furniture that's actually going to improve their posture, that's going to uh, give them an experience when they sit in it. So I think that we are first inhabited by the beauty, and I I think the further you dwell into your own field, the more need you have to actually create an experience for the user. So the functionality has to play an important part. Not to mention that today, um, our world is being inhabited by the automobile and the aeronautics field, which are technically much more advanced than we are. But we have a lot to learn from them only because they have to make furniture where you're going to be sitting for 12 hours on a flight.
So about 10 years ago, I guess you started to complement your line. Was that import, bringing in from Europe? And if so, how easy or how difficult is it to complement a line that you're designing with something that you're importing that you have control over from a design perspective?
Um, so the importing was to kind of enhance the quality of work that we were doing. So the goods that we import are usually our standards or higher. And that actually gives us the opportunity as a team to have a goal to work towards. So we work with some companies in Italy that have been around for 85 years. They have so much innovative ideas in the workmanship that they put out that if we can extract 10, 15% of passion from that, I think that improves our product all the time. So I would say that that is a motivator than it is anything else.
So we'll talk about, how to scale a company like this in a second, Daniel. But first, take us back to some of your history. We discussed earlier you were a hairstylist. You literally traveled around the world to do this. What experiences, what lessons did you draw from that very interesting career, and what did you bring to your company?
So I loved my other career. I loved the opportunity to meet some incredible people. I dreamt of working with the Herb Ritts of the world and the Dominic Issermans of the world, which were some of my icons in the fashion world, and the models, the travel, the locations, the visit. Were amazing. I may not have been able to see some of the places that I've seen, had I not had the opportunity to actually dwell in that world. So for that, I would say that what it brought to the table on what I'm doing today is culture. Um, Design is everywhere in Europe. It seems like it was at the forefront of their thinking. So basically, it actually changed who I was. I think that whole experience helped me evolve to the person that I am today, just through the sheer beauty of everything that I got to see, and the wonderful people that encompassed that business. They Some of the people that I worked with were 20 times more passionate than I could be, and that's amazing. Again, I go back to the contagious nature of being around passionate individuals, and what that can do to a human being is amazing. So I would say working with the people that I worked with, and their contagious, passionate nature is really what I come to this table, the furniture making, with the most.
So it's a really big jump to go from passion, conceptualization intellectually into creating a manufacturing environment. And we all know the manufacturing, certainly in North America, for decades took a big hit in a number of areas. How did you set up a manufacturing facility? How did you go from, conceptual design to, hey, let's start manufacturing, and finding a place and hiring people and creating a manufacturing setup?
I guess it started off with the typical, I don't want a manufacturing, and I'm going to source out everything that I want to have made. And you go through that process. Quebec was a leader in furniture manufacturing, if I'm not mistaken, in the 50s, 60s, and lost that ticket to North Carolina. And basically, I think that we traditionally made affordable furniture. So every time I wanted to bring quality, sustainability, innovation to the product, it became an impossible task. So I opened up the manufacturing plant as a test, and it was very small. And I realized that getting in the sandbox, I was lucky enough to have again met some passionate individuals that were able to play with me in the box. So we were able to start innovating and recreating and breaking some of the molds, the old molds, because we have to say that most furniture making in Montreal today is a 1935 experience. So because of that, it made it very difficult to want to do slip covers the way companies like Polyform and Minotti have been doing for the last 25, 35 years. And because of that, the challenge was that I either give up on any innovative ideas, or I had to create them myself within the walls that I would build for myself.
We're dealing with a supply chain management issue right now across the world, really, and it's interrupting a lot of manufacturing. Is this affecting you? And if so, how are you dealing with it?
I don't think anyone is not affected by it. We were lucky enough to fill up the house with as much product, as much supplies as we could at a time when we had forecasted that this was coming. That said, we are not exempt from the problems out there. We're easily 3 weeks late on all deliveries. Where the employment situation is dire right now, I think worldwide, but I can only speak for my own, for Quebec right now. It's a situation which could erase many manufacturers. So today, I would say that if immigration does not open up its gates, there's going to be major difficulties coming in the next, I would say, even in the next 2 years. So we try to do overtime. We try to convince the employees to do overtime. We pay more money. We keep on paying more money. The attendance at work is down 25% at least. with our regulars. And basically, I have to go back to my parents who came to Canada in 1963 to give their children a better opportunity. And basically we're looking to bring in workers from abroad, basically because we've been struggling for the last 4 or 5 years to find qualified workers.
Yeah, I think, Daniel, you've touched on a very sensitive spot for all of us at this point, and that's not just the Montreal labor market, but the global labor market. But more particular, I think in Montreal, and I think the issues that we have is we start to see, manufacturing come back. So we look at the last 5 years, some more manufacturing facilities have set up. You look at the fact that COVID has kicked in. I think there's a lot of people out there looking for work. The problem is the skilled labor component, and whether that is manufacturing, a furniture environment, or a law firm or a CPA firm. I think this continues to be a bit of a challenge. And do you have any ideas at this point about how you may try and move forward on some of this? Is there an automation component? Is everything you do handmade? Like, how does this affect you?
Everything is handmade. We don't have much automation in our company because we're still considered a small player. But I would say that education from within is something that I learned in the hairdressing world. I still believe that the working model in the hairdressing salons, and when I say the hairdressing salons, I mean the Jean-Louis Davids, the Trevor Sorbys, the Vidal Sassoons of the world, they train from within. Governments have to help on those systems today. And the help that we're getting here in Quebec is 4 months, 5 months. We need to go to the 2 and 3 year educational systems where you have a buddy that you're teaching for the next 3 years that's by your side. It has to happen in-house. The schools are not doing it. The schools are not doing it well enough, I should say. Actually, the schools are attempting, but they're just not doing it well enough. Passion is a very difficult thing to teach. Passion is something that has to be shared. So I'm going to guess that Harvard, MIT, they change their environment by finding the qualified individuals in the world, and they hire them and they bring them in. And it costs what it costs because I think it's an honest investment on their future.
I think you've touched on the topic that really gets to me, which is this whole discussion of mentoring, right? This whole ability to work in a profession, work in an environment, and whether that's auto mechanics, whether that's woodworking, whether that's furniture, whether that's professional firms. And COVID has really taken its toll on the young worker coming to market now. They've spent 1.5 or 2 years trying to work from home, if at all working from home, and that mentoring component. So, if we could get, more people like Daniel Perez to say, hey, let's everybody stand up and let's mentor more people and let's spend that time. What has to happen, unfortunately, is there may be a short-term effect on profits or a short-term effect on efficiency with the anticipation of a long-term benefit. And we live in a world that's not so good at long-term at this point. So I think we'll continue to have this challenge, but I applaud you for bringing that topic up.
We'll have the one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur from Daniel Perez, founder and president of Perez Furniture. He is on the way. But first, Ernie Furt joins us again, tax partner from FL. You've heard Ernie with Andrew and Aaron talking about tax issues. And welcome back, Ernie. We look at the calendar, and I think I have some invoices to collect.
It's a good idea. You should collect them. Make sure you get them before year end.
And receipts.
And receipts. Everything is important. Listen, what you do at the end of the year is you try to defer income, potentially, and to accelerate certain expenses. If you're in a business, if you're self-employed, even if on the personal level. So you want to make sure that you get those expenses, the tax deductible expenses, into 2021, as opposed to incurring them in early 2022. And if you can potentially defer income out to 2022 to smooth your income, if you had a good year potentially, then you should consider that as well. So that's the first thing to do, regardless of the organization of all of your stuff, which is important.
Arnie, during the course of the year, as continued from 2020, there were a lot of subsidies coming in from the government to various employers, to various individuals. What are some of the tax implications as we come to the end of year two in subsidy work?
Well, they're generally taxable, these subsidies, so you have to take a look at them and make sure you're picking them up and including them in income where you receive the subsidy. If you received the rental subsidy, if you received any of the employment subsidies, that's something that you should look at and make sure that you're picking it up and make sure that your balance of tax will work at the end of the year, so you're not forgetting these things and then in for a nasty surprise when you prepare your return.
So we've hit a couple of cases where employers had multiple companies and had payroll out of one account. And with the $40,000 loan and the repayable at 30, or some of the SUs, we hit some snags in those companies that didn't actually have payroll numbers, but were allocating payroll based on some management environment. Can you give us a little bit of an insight into that?
This is not an area that I deal with very often or at all. You just have to make sure that you speak to the right people dealing with these payroll issues and ensure that you're entitled to get what you already received, so you don't have to repay it in all of its entirety.
Yeah, there's been a couple of cases where the government picks up on the fact that there's no deductions at source number, and it's created a little bit of a headache for the employer who's trying to allocate salaries.
It also creates some GST QST confusion, because if you have payroll, like a paymaster company and a bunch of other companies that you're kind of allocating payroll to, you have to charge GST QST on the allocated costs. So you got to figure that out and make sure that you either A, have to, or B, you file an election where you don't need to. But that's a GST QST issue. What I'd really like to get into is some end of year planning, organization of stuff, simple things that the everyday person can do. Kind of like if you think about it. Right now, everyone's preparing to make holiday gifts and to purchase all the holiday gifts. They have to purchase them early because of the supply chain issues. So you're purchasing them early. I need money. Where am I going to get the money from? I don't have that money. Do you have any money in your tax-free savings account, for example? So if you do, you can pull out that money from your tax-free savings account. Doesn't cost you anything. Get your gifts. And then at the end of the year, or January 1, your tax-free savings account, that contribution room is refreshed. So you can put that money back. So you're kind of borrowing money from yourself in order to get your holiday gift. It's an interesting way to go, and it's something that people may do. You want to do donations. A lot of people do. Take a look in November and December and said, "Oh, I haven't given enough charitable donations. So what should I do to do that? What's the easiest thing to do? Do I have any securities with an appreciated value? So I may want to donate those securities to avoid the capital gain on those securities and get a full donation receipt for the full value of that security."
So the two interesting points there, Ernie. One, from a tax-free savings account perspective, how people often ask the question, well, I put my money in there, I'm not paying any tax. When I pull it out, what are the implications and how much can I pull out before there's any issues?
You could pull out all of it. It doesn't matter at the end of the day. In terms of issues, it's there. A tax-free savings account is there as a rainy day fund. Okay, so you put the money in and hopefully leave it there for as long as you possibly can, so it could continue to accumulate income on a tax-free basis, not a tax-deferred basis like an RRSP. I've seen a lot of people in situations where they have taxable investments and they don't have any tax-free savings account. So this is something that's essential, that people take a look at their overall financial picture and see where they stand best and where they get the biggest bang for the buck, whether it would be tax-free savings account, paying off non-deductible debt, the interest, so you can reduce your interest costs, or putting money aside in an RRSP. RRSP money is going to be sitting there, and that's the money you want to save till retirement. So if you want to earmark a certain percentage of your salary, do that, earmark that. But if you haven't done anything yet, take a look at your overall picture, see what makes sense, discuss it with your financial advisor, discuss it with your spouse, and make sure you do what you need to do in order to properly do your financial planning for this year and the years to come.
Thank you very much, Ernie. Ernie Furt, tax partner at FL. And as we close our show, let's turn back to Daniel Perez of Perez Furniture, and ask him for his one piece of advice for today's entrepreneur, sir.
So I would say that I probably freaked out when I started my company. The freak out was probably due to the lack of information, the lack of knowledge of how to manufacture. And I think that if I had to look back at anything that I would have changed, or the things that have improved, is that I would say you have to absolutely study. You have to study your business. You have to understand it. It calms the spirit. It makes for a much better working relationship with the team. I am only one person, but I am absolutely nothing without my team. And basically, in order to stay humble with the team, I have to know what I need to know about the business so that I can continue leading them and guiding them into the never-ending educational situation of manufacturing. So for me, it is absolutely understanding your business. And it took me a while to understand that one. And when I did, it definitely calmed everything down and made for a much better working environment for all.
Daniel, thank you very much for that. Mike, final thoughts on today's show?
Yeah, it's always amazing that no matter what industry we look at, we always come back to one word, and that's passion. And and whether that's artistry, whether that's manufacturing, whether that is professional services, whether that is athletes, I think a passion and an interest, and as Daniel was saying, knowing what you're doing, which the more passion you have, the more you're involved in what you're doing, and I think that has a huge role in helping us get through the difficult times, because we all know every entrepreneur is going to face a difficult time, and you still got to get up in the morning, and you still got to be at your desk at 6 or 7 or whatever it is in order to start the day before everybody else. Without passion, my friend, it's not so easy to do.
Daniel Perez, thanks so much. Perez Furniture is the business. And thanks very much for joining us on this edition of Today's Entrepreneur. And Mike, next week we'll be chatting with the co-founders of AI Fred Health, who will tell us about using AI to personalize treatment selection in depression, the leading cause of medical disabilities on the planet. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the podcast on iHeartRadio, iTunes, or your favorite platform, and log on to today'sentrepreneur.org for hundreds of local entrepreneur stories going back about 13 years. We'll see you here next week.
This has been a production of TNKR Media. Good talk.